I'm Darren Chetty. I'm a doctoral candidate at the UCL Institute of Education. I'm working in the field of philosophy of education and the critical philosophy of race, and more specifically I'm looking at the Philosophy for Children programme and researching that with respect to race and racism. And that comes out of my work as a primary school teacher since the late 90s, doing philosophy for children in primary classrooms, mostly in East London, and looking at some of the issues that emerged in my practice and trying to make sense of them, sensing that there was a bit of a gap in the literature related to racism specifically. So up until this term, I was a primary teacher in Hackney. I'm now teaching part-time on the BA in Education Studies at the UCL Institute of Education. It's mostly the philosophy of education modules and some general education studies programs as well. So it's the third conference I've been to now, and the conferences are just great opportunities to hear some of the best philosophers of education present their work, but also to have opportunities to talk more informally about some of that work. I really enjoyed the communal meal times at conferences where you can just sort of chat about what you've experienced in the day, share ideas, and always find sort of new ideas to push your thinking on. I was lucky enough this year to have a paper accepted, so there was also the chance to present my work, which will also help me in completing my thesis. So my paper had a rather long title. It was Philosophical Inquiry, Racism and White Discomfort. Do we really wish to dwell together? So I was looking at a term that I'm calling white discomfort, which is really about the reactions, or some of the common reactions, both from my experience and in the theoretical literature, of people racialised as white to conversations around racism. And it was trying to make sense of how we can get into positions of discomfort that can be productive and allow us to explore issues, rather than a discomfort that in some way closes down discussion. The question, do we really wish to dwell together, was an attempt to sort of pun on dwelling in terms of living together and thinking together. And I'm quite keen on exploring sort of residential metaphors for how we operate in classrooms. So whether we genuinely are a community, or whether at times we develop almost gated communities where some undesirable people or subjects are kept without from the setting. So I'm now working on trying to develop the paper I presented at the conference into a chapter for my thesis. I had some really useful questions and feedback at conference, so I'm taking that forward, particularly looking at the work of Megan Bowler on the pedagogy of discomfort. She focuses mostly on discomfort with relation to students or pupils, and I think my interest is also on the discomfort of educators, particularly in settings where, for instance, philosophy for children in the UK, so many practitioners are racialised as white, and yet when they're working in London, they're often working in very racially diverse communities. So getting an understanding on how we as educators can be aware of discomfort and work with it, which I think also is fundamental to being a philosopher, to sort of cultivate a comfort with discomfort and an ability to stay with uncertainty and not be overwhelmed by the anxiety that can provoke.